This video is sponsored by Oedipus Rex, who died geeked up playing Xbox all day.
Hank, would you like a beer?
This is not a social call, John Redcorn.
Okay, before I say anything else, I just have to ask right off the bat, what on this godforsaken earth is Bobby eating in this scene? Like, what is that? What is that, Private Pile? Is it orange mush, mashed up yams, liquefied Lorax? It's just, that is odd. That is really odd. Anyway, we all have our secrets, my friends. For example, I like milk.
Hey, that's the best so far. Do one about cookies.
But while it's one thing to keep your own secrets, such as your answers to the game of fuck, marry, kill of celebrities that you'd have zero chance of ever getting with anyway, and coincidentally those answers for me would obviously be Simone Sanders, Niecy Nash, and Whoopi Goldberg, in that order, don't get them mixed up for God's sakes, it is an entirely different ballgame to keep somebody else's dirty little secrets, especially in this case, as doing so has made our lovable crew of Arlinians culpable in perpetuating something that is really harming somebody else. But admittedly, I haven't seen this episode in a while, so what's the big secret that everybody's keeping? Nancy and John Redcorn are having an affair? I don't believe it. I've known Dale and Nancy for years, and they have a fairy book marriage. Well, maybe if the fairy book was written by Franz Bonaparte or Klaus Poppe, if you know what I mean. But as much as this story is about Nancy and John R, the R in this case standing for railing, it really isn't about them. This episode is much more centered around the big lie and how everyone in the neighborhood has been allowing it to go on unchecked.
Yeah, man, you don't want to be prying in them family secrets, Hank, man. You don't get in a little skeleton in the closet, man. It's like having an Orville Redenbacher, man. Turns out just a dang old actor, man.
With that being said, I want to be totally Oprah honest and transparent with you guys and say that this is the first review of King of the Hill that I have truly struggled to write. Because this episode is so much more than just a string of successful jokes or character interactions or haircuts that make you look like what would happen if Bobby fell into a vat of boiling estrogen. No, this goes even further beyond becoming an interwoven system of relationships, secrets, morality questions, and of course that oh so important element of shame.
Shame! Shame!
I can't just sit here and point out what qualities I find successful or resonant, no more than you could just describe the US Capitol building in the same way that you would describe a retirement home on Yelp. It's like, that old thing over there, yeah, it's got a cafeteria, some clean bathrooms, spacious hallways, some nice high ceilings. I'd say it's like an 8 out of 10 on a good day, and oh yes, it's also where trillions of dollars of the national budget are allocated. Meh, who cares? Me just pointing out how this episode succeeds in every imaginable way and does so in a fashion that feels truly effortless, and just say what we all know, that it's so triumphantly paced and it uses all of its characters to full effect and it's so great and awesome and I love it and it's so wonderful. All of that praise is very correct and accurate and very handsome of me to say, but it still feels like I'm doing a disservice to the full scope of all of the crazy stuff that's going on here and all the background stuff and just everything. Oh my god.
Well, all right, way to go, Big Bad John.
Because if we step beyond the boundaries, the basic questions of this episode's quality, we see that this is our first real foray into the Nancy and John Redcorn problem, which is easily the most complicated, three-dimensional, and far-reaching conflict of the entire series. This issue, these jokes, and all of these questions go through entire evolutionary arcs, series spanning ups and downs throughout the seasons, with eager tentacles that squiggle through the alleyways and carreteras of the little town called Arlen. This is the rotten heart that pumps bile into our water supply, creating a scandalous slurry that people are all too happy to imbibe. And they all have their reasons for succumbing to that taint, ranging from being amused by the infidelity, to thinking that family secrets just flat out shouldn't be discussed, to doing whatever they can to ignore an ugly situation that they would rather not be a part of.
I have to get out of here.
Ballpark nachos. You don't buy them, you only rent them.
Oh, for crying out loud!
What makes this problem even worse and far more complicated and wonderfully engaging to talk about is that we are never shown the initial eureka moment where Hank, Bill, or Boomhauer first realized what was going on. No, we come in on this whole thing when the spread eagling has already been happening for about 12 frickin' years now, leaving a whole swath of nuance out of the audience's awareness and kind of drawing us into being as culpable as the guys. Because we have also been aware of the affair for 2 years now, since we're in season 3 and the audience at the time had been watching it for a few years, blah blah blah, and this is our first chance to actually reach into the dirt, yank it out by the roots, pull it into the air, look at it in the light, and examine it in all of its cuckolding quote-unquote glory. Oh, and fun fact here, a willing cuckold, meaning a man who knows what's going on, is actually called a whittle, and funner fact, the descriptor calipesian, the word calipesian, means to have a shapely buttocks. So the next time someone comes up to you in the club and says, "Hey dude, I'm the biggest whittle on the west side, and I'd like you to spend some time with my calipesian lady," you'll know what's going on, and knowing is half the battle. But us not knowing the exact circumstances that created the uneasy equilibrium of the guy's awareness of Nancy and John Redcorn's diddlin' does leave a bunch of really important questions unanswered. Like, did the guys know about the missionary mayhem before or after Joseph was born? I think that's a very, super salient question to ask. Like, did John Redcorn already have a reputation for home wrecking even in those early days, possibly even before he met Nancy? Did the guys all recognize the red flags all at once, or did they arrive at the truth at different stages, perhaps even piecemeal? I think it's even possible that the three of them had a sit-down man-meeting moment where one of them wanted to talk about the secret that they thought only they knew about, and when they finally said something, when they finally said, "Hey, I think Nancy's cheating," the other two stood up and went, "Holy crap, I thought I was the only one who saw what's happening. What the fuck do we do?"
So I asked John Redcorn to stay at the house to protect her while I was gone. I thought I was being so smart, but I have never been so stupid.
Oh, Dale, I'm so sorry.
But make no mistake, my friends, however and whenever they came to the conclusion to let sleeping dogs lie, to let them lie like dogs, the time to tell Dale the truth was as soon as they realized what was happening. Regardless of the fallout that it would have caused to the Gribble household and beyond, it was not the guys' responsibility to shield Dale from Nancy's poor choices, but it was their decision to keep quiet about the whole thing that condemned Dale to the hellish situation that we first find him in. I point all this out because I think it's really easy for us to just dismiss John Redcorn's pile-driving habits as a simple inevitability, or as the more glue-consuming inclined among us would say, his canon event, where we consider this act of cheating as indifferent and inimical and as inevitable as an avalanche or an earthquake, especially given how hard that bed must rock. Woo! But yes, nothing was ever set in stone, you see. Things could have been different, but because of the cowardice of Dale's supposed friends, what began as a bit of discordant unease in his household has been allowed to build into this screaming cacophony of damnation. And yet, I do understand the guys' reasoning behind their hesitancy to tell Dale what was going on, at least to a degree. The old school conservative mindset of, "Hey, whatever's happening over at the neighbor's house is none of my business, sweetheart. Now, how about you get me a third martini and I'll let you polish my shoes," is a big part of why the situation has been allowed to get as bad as it is. It's the classic, "Hey, we don't talk about the family's secret shame" type deal, a feeling that is also known as the Jeb Bush effect. Not because of anything Jeb Bush himself has ever done, but simply because he carries the shame, the intense shame of somehow being the least charismatic person of the fucking Bush family. That's like losing a singing competition to Michael Myers or being the smelliest person at Comic-Con. And much like Jeb Bush, there's also the consideration that Dale has, by his own account, quote, "oodles of guns," unquote, meaning that it is very possible that he would have utterly snapped and gone on a rampage if one of his friends had informed him of his wife's infidelity, either going on to harm himself or others.
I thought you'd kill yourself.
And this next little point may sound a bit uncharacteristic of me, as, I usually try to be as empathetic and non-confrontational as possible, but whatever negative effects of exposing the truth it would have had on Dale's life or psyche, that's entirely on Nancy's head and her poor decisions, in my opinion. She's the one who'd be at fault, not the guys. Although obviously Dale would still be responsible and accountable for controlling his own actions, I don't want this to come off sounding like I'm excusing psychopathy or blaming a downcast put-upon wife for causing her unstable husband to fly into a murderous rage, because if he did snap, that'd be totally unacceptable, and considering he lives in Texas, he'd probably ride the liquid lightning of old Squirty if he actually did kill somebody, but there are only so many vile actions that can be done to a person before they go careening off the edge of reason. That's not a value judgment that I'm making, that's not a personal opinion of mine, that's just a fact of life. Everybody has a breaking point.
Oh, can I borrow this sink?
I need ketchup for my eggs, Rolfie boy.
Anyone got a breath mint?
The burden of hospitality is too great for all!
That said, it is really hard to say definitively whether he would go nuts or not, because Dale does show a willingness to harm humans at times, so keeping the secret might be in everybody's best interest. However, that potential factor could definitely be something that is weaponized by Nancy to keep everybody quiet, you know? Because if she really was worried about the threat of violence, of betting the lives of herself and others on Dale's brain not making this rather obvious connection, then she really doesn't act like it's a worthwhile concern, the way she goes just shamelessly flaunting everything out and about. Like, you'd think if she really was, like, concerned about potentially being killed by Dale, then she'd be a little bit more discreet.
I know what you're here for.
Dale, this isn't how I wanted you to find out.
My bottom line here, and if you take nothing else away from this video, I hope it's this: I strongly believe that the guys should have been better friends to Dale and ripped the band-aid off on day one, as Dale himself tries to do for Hank this time in this episode when he believes that Peggy has become romantically interested in him.
Hank, there's something I just figured out and you need to know. Your wife loves me and wants us to run off together. I've not yet been able to ascertain where.
That right there, that is actually one of the Big D's most noble and respectful actions in the entire series. He doesn't try to hide the truth or shirk responsibility by saying to himself like, what would telling Hank mean for his marriage? How would Bobby react? Why should I even get involved? Hank might go nuts and kick everybody's ass into the grave, etc., etc. You know, why should I even risk myself? No, he doesn't think any of that. He realizes that this is something that's really fucked up and he's deeply concerned about it, so he tells his friend, even though doing so comes with all kinds of terrible risks to their friendship and Hank's happiness. But that's not Dale's fault in this little hypothetical situation. It would be Peggy's for even putting Dale in the situation in the first place.
Dale,
No problemo on this end. I don't even find her attractive.
I'm kicking your ass.
She hasn't even done anything bad yet. Dale just thinks that she's doing a little bit of flirting with him, and he tells Hank right away. He doesn't keep his mouth shut and go like, oh, that was kind of a weird thing. I'm sure it was just a one-off. She didn't mean it. Like, I just caught her in a weird mood. No. Like, it isn't anything. I'm sure it's not. It's nothing that I need to get involved in. No, he recognizes that it's something concerning, and he stops things from getting worse instead of keeping his mouth shut and allowing a love child to be born. Even though revealing this inconvenient truth may mean that things will get ugly for Hank, Dale shows that he's willing to be a support system for his friend, which, if the same kind of support and empathy and understanding were offered to Mr. Gribble, then the chances of him going on that oh-so-hypothetical violent rampage, at least if the truth had been revealed in the earliest of days, would have been lessened considerably. But regrettably, the guys have known about Nancy's canoodling for far too long, and if the truth were revealed now, then everybody would be implicated in the act of concealment. It's all tied together by a little thing we like to call the threat of mutually assured destruction. Just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? Should anyone ever dare spill the beans, why you spill your beans, Tommy boy, then the little lady called Cancy could point out how everybody in the neighborhood already knew for a whole decade and didn't say anything, spreading the blame around to folks who, let's be honest, do deserve a fair bit of heat. And just imagine if literally every one of your friends and close associates knew some awful, horrible, just bone-crushing secret about you and kept it hidden. Wouldn't you just go mad? Incidentally, something like that did actually happen to me once, where somebody's 10-year lie caused me to lose out on And I'm not kidding here, this actually factually happened, $2 million. If that certain someone had been honest with me about a very unfortunate truth, then I could have helped stop the bleeding and I would have $2 million in my pocket right now. So I don't need to imagine how Dale would react if he discovered what's been going on. I have already lived through that dreadful, mind-shattering revelation of things having been secretly awful for many, many years, and allow me to show you a little reenactment of how I reacted when I had the truth nuke detonate in my face.
Fiddle-dee-dee.
Ah, memories. Yes, yours truly has certainly gone through several goofball moments. But this isn't about me or a few nightmare anecdotes of my juicy personal life that I have been carefully redacting from a bunch of these reviews. It is about the head-scratching conundrum of a fictional affair, one that simply boggles the mind.
Boggle.
I guess that's why they call her your better.
Who calls her that?
John Redcorn.
Because I better have vagina on the table when he gets home.
Boggle. What a boggle.
To put it plainly, long ago, Hank, Bill, and Boomhauer collectively decided to slap a band-aid on a bullet wound and just call it a day. But now it's 12 years later, and the band-aid has become a part of the body, one that has blended in with the skin, and if it were ever removed, it would reveal a rotting gap, a gash of putrid flesh, and the entire limb would fall off. Excusing Nancy's infidelity through an omission of the truth is like killing Caesar. Everybody's guilty. Caesar's been stabbed to death by his senators? I don't believe it. I've lived under Caesar for years, and he was a very book emperor. But none of this is the case for dear old Peggy, who is totally unaware of what's been going on and genuinely believes that Dale and Nancy are in a happy marriage. A strained one perhaps, but no worse for wear than any of the other small-town couples she knows. And in a frighteningly smart bit of continuity, up until this point in the show, we have never actually seen or heard any confirmation from Peggy that she is aware of Nancy's Uramatio inclination. I've actually been keeping a very close eye out for any kind of signs of that thing this whole last year that I've been reviewing the series, keeping an eye on Peggy and seeing if there's any little hints that she might know, and trust me, just like every dating app inbox I've ever had, there is nothing to be found there, which is more than we can allegedly say for Bouncin' Bobby Hill.
It looks just like the one on my dad's truck. You mean Dale Gribble's truck?
What do you mean?
Because from the very pilot episode, the Nancy-John R. relationship has been on full display, and it took until now, season 3, for the show to truly, finally address it. She's Johning on my corn till I'm red? She's corning on my red till I John. She's redding on my John till I corn. Now, because this video is already going to be long enough, I want to say that I will not be going into detail about how Nancy and John Redcorn actually interact with each other, whether they would actually be happy together if Dale wasn't in the picture, or what aspects of their character sort of like qualities that I actually like or dislike. We still have many more episodes about them to do in the future, ones where we can get into all of that fun parasocial and like psychological shit, and the wider considerations surrounding their oh so troublesome and oh so exhaustive relationship. So for the purposes of this review, I'll keep my thoughts simple and limit myself to just talking about how Peggy and the guys factor into this conversation around the scandal, or at least do as best as I can.
Mix pineapple juice with club soda. You got yourself a big bucket of crap.
That's the best so far.
Now that we can actually talk about the episode itself and not the huge, like, gaseous smog that surrounds the thing and smothers it like it's something bad that smothers you, our lurid story opens with a view of a typical day in the neighborhood. The newspaper is waiting on the stoop, the coffee percolator is percolating, and Dale is off to another productive day of snuffing out life.
Morning, Dale.
Boggle.
This is our quote-unquote before scene, a situation that won't undergo any notable changes itself, but our perspective of the events and what's going on will shift dramatically as new shit comes to light. And hey, looky there, old Swingin' Redcorn, as they call him for reasons that I'm not entirely sure about, is here! What a treat. I'm sure glad he's on his way to help poor Nancy with her debilitating brain rot.
Peggy, Just dropping off a new healing herb for Nancy to help with her migraines. Ginkgo biloba.
Right. And speaking of Nancy, there's a certain morning worm that she's getting early and will continue to have with her for the next few hours. Let's remember that, because as Peggy goes on to read the newspaper and spend time coming up with her musings and, to the point where she gets a headache and all of that, the spirited activity next door with Mr. Candy Corn rages on to the point where it all starts to get, frankly, a little cartoonish. It may sound fun on paper to do the Monster Mash for an entire afternoon, but, and I say this next statement with absolutely no ego attached, I've done that, and there does come a point where both of you just want to wrap it up. This whole oh yeah, baby, John Redcorn cruises over 5 times a week and is there for 3 hours a day, every day, strikes me as a very juvenile imaginary scenario of a satisfying sexual relationship, which I suppose is appropriate for a missionary mambo that is shown to be this shallow. But whatever, it's just an exaggerated extreme, a joke that wants to bring out some scandalous chuckles, and that's all fine, haha, good gag, no pun intended. Ugh. I just wanted to voice this little snippet of reality so that the less knowledgeable among us don't assume that this is a true idealized sexual situation, because it really would either get extremely boring or chafe-inducing. Besides, the real G's out there know that the true idealized situation is getting trapped on a bed with several cats that absolutely hate your guts hovering around the floor like lava, cats that border on being feral and would strip your legs to the bone if you tried to leave, meaning that you're held hostage until you can earn your freedom out of there by making the cat's owner, that poor, unfortunate soul, yowl until it scares the murderous felines away. Or so I've heard. Can we get a little musing in here? Because I think I've gotten a bit off track.
They say children are a blessing, but mine are holy terrors. Doyle Harkavy knows children. Of course, his daughter jumped out a window.
You hear that, Dad? You're gonna pay!
I'm not sure why I have this mental connection, but I always associate this image of Harkavy's daughter's downward spiral, with one of the stories from the movie Cat's Eye, namely The Ledge, which is very memorable, and I would highly suggest all of y'all check out that little vignette as it's pretty good. That little funky mental link aside, this is a good chance for me to talk about one of the biggest and most underrated strengths of King of the Hill, which is their extremely effective, memorable, and wide-ranging types of names that they use for their side characters, which always have a very unique and kind of like a folksy flair to them, which I really, I like that a lot. Specifically, I really like the name of that musing machine, Doyle Harkavy, which has a lyrical and literary bent to it, where it really does sound like he's the kind of person who'd be firmly planted in the legacy of the writerly sphere, humble but with an air of dignity. This kind of textured naming quality is also true of people like Heck Dorlin, Principal Moss, a pimp named Whiteback, Irwin Linker, and Anthony Page, the first Elden Lord. But oh my god, just as we're starting to love that man's inspired mind, we learn that the tragic titan of microfiction is retiring for making Rupi Kaur look like the fucking hack that she is, and like a shark sensing blood in the water, Peggy moves in to fill the Harkavy hole. Which I totally get. Many writerly spaces are highly competitive, and even small-time positions like this one can be jealously guarded, meaning that you really need to seize on any opportunity that presents itself, even if that chance is brought about by tragedy or the misfortune of others. And that's why I enjoy this YouTube gig as much as I do, because my success is not dependent on anybody else but myself. Another person's failure or downward turn in their life or channel does not translate to a win for me or vice versa. I have no competition, no hero to dethrone or grand master to surpass, even if certain viewers will try to pit us against one another, which is admittedly pretty amusing. The only person that I care about one-upping is the man in the mirror, the man who sold the world, who I thought died alone a long time ago. But oh, not me, I never lost control. So I ask again, will you say my name? Has the memory gone? Are you feeling numb? Or have I become invisible? Duran Duran and Bowie aside, YouTube is not at all like trying to get a tenure-track teaching position where you have to wait for a professor who's been around since 1982 to finally get taxidermied. There are more than enough spaces all around here for we critics and commentators to all thrive. But as Peggy comes to find, musings, and really any piece of short writing to be honest, is so incredibly tough to get just right that old Sasquatch gets stuck in a cycle of dismissing ideas as quickly as they arrive.
Why don't you try some out on me? Give me your 5 best.
I cannot work with you coming in here every 2 hours and yelling at me.
And here's a little tip for all you aspiring writers out there. A page full of garbage is infinitely more useful than a blank page. It doesn't matter what you write, just put down something, anything, even if that means closing your eyes and writing something without concern about spelling, punctuation, or readability. You have permission, my permission, to just go nuts. Do it, you can edit it later, you can fix it, but you gotta have something, I just gotta tell you. Produce anything. And in that vein of overcoming the void of a blank page, Peggy does what any good writer stuck on a particularly tricky mental snag would do. She barges her way into her friend's house and tries to squeeze them for some insights. But let's just say there's a different kind of almost insight. Look, they're having sex, okay? Let's just cut the coquettish Rocky Mountain oratories and just be straightforward for once, with none of this childish wordplay. Although, my God, when she drops her megagonal ass at an egregious angle, that does make her your non-Euclidean bae.
Nancy?
Through the divine miracle of the Fox censors, these two love muffins managed to fling their clothes back on before Peggy could find them in flagrity on the credenza. This is when we are confronted with the dizzying reality that Peg thinks that head rubbing, not that kind, is all that's going on, which leads her to seeking out Mr. Redcorn's more traditional healing services.
Of course, John Redcorn. You're a licensed New Age healer. Why don't I try a healing session with you?
Ooh, that's just weird.
So here's the thing, the King of the Hill fandom has a few different reactions when it comes to the subject of Peggy's intelligence. There are those who think that she's a well-meaning but easily fooled person. There are those who believe she is pretty smart but is often held back by her bloated sense of self-worth. There are those who think that she is street smart and really not academically smart at all, which kind of creates this like weird balance of her being kind of smart in some situations but dumb in other ones. And then there's folks who think that Peggy is a barely functional moron. Your opinion on Peggy's intelligence is heavily dependent on how enjoyable you find the joke of her exaggerated pride to be. Personally, I find it extremely fun, to the point where I have a great deal of admiration for how the writers and showrunners are able to wield Peggy's self-importance like a surgical needle, perfectly punctuating our pain centers with the lightest of tickling touches.
You cannot make authentic guacamole out of lima beans and Ritz crackers. All these people. Gringos.
But don't mistake me here, it's not that I don't feel the same pain that the Peggy haters feel, because I really do groan at many of her just awful lines, like, oh my God, you're really saying that? You're really doing this right now? It's just that I can appreciate the intent and skill behind the writing, the way that I appreciate Kai Wynn from Deep Space Nine. I love her, even though I hate her so much. But even with that consideration, I have to say that I don't think that Peggy's blind spot to the Nancy John R situation comes from a place of self-imposed blindness, or that she's so prideful that she can't see what's going on, or just that she's really stupid and ignorant and all of that. I don't think it's anything like that at all. And yes, admittedly, this is just my reading of the text here. This is my personal opinion and not anything that the show says outright, but I do think that Peggy's blindness to the situation has a lot more to do with how awful this deed really is, rather than a question of Peggy's intelligence, as I think this act is so utterly abhorrent and vile and terrible that her mind, much like Dale's mind, does not allow such a thought to enter into the realm of possibility. Because when Hank later confronts her about the differences, the obvious physical differences between Dale and Joseph, she doesn't just shrug it off and say, oh, what differences? What are you talking about? Those two look like peas in a pod. He is so obviously Dale's son. What are you worrying about? No, she has not only noticed that something was off there, but she has even talked to Nancy about it.
How could you not know? I mean, look at Joseph. Where do you think he came from?
Nancy told me Dale had a Jamaican grandmother.
Right, you see, she understood that there was something a bit off with Joseph. She did ask Nancy about the physical differences that were present in the kid, which then led Nancy to create a really terrible slapdash lie, one that she is damn lucky that Peggy never followed up with to Dale. Imagine if she asked about his Jamaican ancestry or made a joke about it. Dale probably would have thought she was fucking insane. You know, thinking about it a little bit more, it's actually nuts that is the best excuse, the best lie that Nancy could come up with, that Joseph is like 1/16th Jamaican? Like, how fucking stupid is that? It just goes to show how little thought she's actually like put into covering her own ass, and how unquestioning Peggy is of her friend, which is almost the worst thing about Nancy's behavior, just at how like utterly bad and terrible and like uncaring she is at hiding any of this. And can we just acknowledge the awfulness of the affair for a second? Because I really think that the cruelty of Nancy and John R. gets swept away by the jokey nature of how they conduct themselves and their obvious canoodling. Like, it feels very, like, sort of lighthearted, but when you actually stop to think about it, this is a terrible thing that these two are doing. Because betraying your spouse's trust, not just once, not just twice, but continually, and over the span of many, many years, to the point where you even get pregnant with your lover's baby, and then after the baby's born, you're not scared, you're not deterred, you keep going. You double, triple, quadruple down for a few thousand more times by my estimate. You know, if John Redcorn visits at least 3 times a week and he's been coming over for more than a decade, that level of callousness and just straight up evil borders on the psychotic. And I think that's what really riles me up about this cowgirl catastrophe, that neither of them seem truly worried about ever getting caught. Well, okay, you know what, to be fair, Nancy does sometimes seem a little afraid, but never to the point where she actually gets scared enough to call it quits. She just keeps coming back and coming back. It's like an addiction at this point. But John Redcorn, man, he's just the worst. He especially seems to have like no fear of anything bad happening to him, like, ever. He even seems to have this like entitled sense of, Nancy's mine and everything but name, and if Dale ever figured it out, well then, meh, I would just push that weenie over and finally take my precious Nan out of there. Like, is that what you really think is gonna happen, dude? I don't know. I am baffled, that's a good word, I am baffled by how unafraid of Dale he is. He will even sometimes confront Dale with weirdo statements, like the time when he answered Nancy's question where she asked, oh honey, do you want a beer? And he says yes right in front of like Dale. He fucking says yes, what are you talking about? He says yes. The man is totally indifferent to the possibility that Dale might figure this out and fucking kill him, to the point where he even says like, oh Dale, this isn't how I wanted you to find out, and oh, he's taking some of the fun out of this, which is just exhausting. You are an exhausting man, John Redcorn. I don't know. The dude just has some weirdo shit going on with him. He's like a baby playing in the mouth of a crocodile. This is a guy who is taunting a wild animal, expecting never ever to get bit. Ooh. And I'm aware that I'm projecting a lot of my own personal thoughts and opinions onto John R., but he really does seem to have this overconfident air of being untouchable, a feeling that he shows off when Hank confronts the man about potentially shaking up Peggy's boggle board.
If you lay one unprofessional hand on Peggy, I'm gonna kick your ass. Loser! You're a loser! Are you feeling sorry for yourself? You make me sick, you big baby! Baby want a bottle? A big dirt bottle?
Why are you yelling at me?
It's actually astounding to me that Mr. Redcorn can have such a lewd reputation around Arlen and not have any jealous husbands come gunning after him. Because let's remember, he is not just doing this to Nancy and Dale. The man passes out more baby gravy than a cannibal running a daycare.
Hank, you are my friend. I promise you, I would never heal your wife in the way that I heal the wives of others.
Wives, not wife, wives, plural. Ugh, how awful. I mean, if the man wants to be a gigolo / new age healer, then more power to him. I don't have a single issue with sex workers. It's just his propensity to, as Mr. Strickland would say, sample soup out of somebody else's bowl. He fucks people's wives, and in the traditionally bad way. Not one of those situations where the husband wants to be cuckolded or is part of an open relationship, like my man Dr. Phlox. God, I love that beautiful non-human being. Also, here's a question for you guys. A true serious question, not a hypothetical or a jokey half question, a real inquiry that I would like to see answered in the comments. Do you think that John is saying that he wouldn't make sweet love to Peggy because he respects Hank, or is he just saying that because he doesn't find her attractive? If, say, hypothetically, Hank was the one who is married to Nancy, who is definitely the kind of woman that John desires, then do you think Mr. Redcorn would be able to withhold his lustful proclivities out of respect for Hank? Or if that's not something that you want to answer, then riddle me this, Batman. Do you think that Hank would be able to kick John's ass? I certainly have some strong opinions on both questions, that I could be saying here, but for once I'll be mean and leave you guessing for now. I'll probably answer both of those questions, if I remember, in the Season 3 retrospect, which, hey, gives you a reason to check that out, huh? Because, I put a lot of work into those, and they're really hard. Anyway, I gotta say, one of the more weirdly tragic aspects of this whole scenario is that John actually shows us that he's a pretty potent healer when he wants to be. The routine that he gives Peggy does seem wonderfully soothing and caring, the kind of professional air that weaves a weird kind of magical transcendence over the whole thing, placing an aura of calming peace over Mrs. Hill.
There. Now lie quietly for as long as you want, while I copy both sides of your insurance card.
While my eyebrow has been known to raise in scorn when people turn away from actual medical treatments in favor of alternative techniques, if this is the relaxation treatment that helps Peggy start cranking out her musings, then why not embrace it? There are certainly a lot more destructive ways of relaxing, that's for sure. Oh, another question for you all. Would it surprise you at all to learn that I always write these scripts stone cold sober? I didn't need no alcohol, smokables, or sexy bit of kidney prodding to brew up a bunch of laughably terrible musings, which I have intentionally wrote in Peggy's delightfully cringy style. But I won't read those now. I'll save them for the end of the video, so don't forget. Right now, it's far more important that we talk about how Peggy is finally brought eye to eye with the sweat-soaked situation going on next door. When she arrives home from her oh-so-spine-melting healing session with John freaking Redcorn, she describes the experience thusly.
I just had a headache session with John Redcorn. He lit some sweet grass, and then I drifted off. The next thing I knew, I felt fan-freaking-tastic.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
What the heck is that?
Ping pong paddle.
This causes Hank to start wondering if Peggy has been allowing Mr. Redcorn to read some cliterature, which isn't helped by her extremely satisfied pose, the animation of which has always looked like kind of janky to me, like she just sort of clicks into place with no transition. Like that's weird to the eye, right? But yeah, it doesn't look good from Hank's perspective, as Peggy is seen dancing excitedly with Nancy like they're NPCs in a Katamari Damacy game, and she even says that she needs to schedule regular sessions with the infamous indigenous stimulus because, hey, her musings were accepted and she got the column, huzzah! And what was the masterpiece of inspired thought that earned her this high honor?
My husband calls me his better half because I better have dinner on the table when he gets home.
While that definitely does have that vaguely abusive air that certain folks out there do enjoy, here's a musing of my own. Being bold is like fucking your own mother. People will criticize you for it, no matter how well it's done. No, you know what? Outside of the city of Thebes, that's not really gonna play well with mass audiences. Men 18 to 35 will be turned off, so instead, how about writing is like cleaning Godzilla's ass. It's even harder than it looks. Yes, much better, very good. But Hank, fearing that he'll become the next Dale Gribble, as sad as that is to say, he tries to tell Peggy what's going on with our least favorite weather girl.
Nancy, John Redcorn, Joseph.
Ginkgo biloba.
Excuse my colorful language here, but what in the name of the prophets and the celestial temple is John Redcorn doing to Hank's fence? Hammering on the top of it while Nancy and Joseph just watch on like lobotomized magpies? Like, say, what? I understand their positioning here is just so Peggy can get a direct view of the strong genetic influences, but in the context of the scene, this does look extremely strange. Although how generous it is of Mr. Redcorn to fix up Hank's undamaged fence after Mr. Hill threatened to kick his ass, now that's service. But yes, with a gentle bit of prodding from Hank and a special bit of assistance from the animators, the floodgates of disclosure finally fly open.
Good God!
From here, Peggy is overwhelmed by revulsion and betrayal in a way that feels very authentic to the experience of rewiring your brain around a bundle of new, disturbing information. I particularly like how she's so energized by this glut of cursed knowledge that she loses focus on her surroundings and charges blindly forward.
How can she? I just cannot believe. Oh! Ow!
That is just so great. It's so true to life and amusing. It's the little things like that that you don't even realize until like somebody portrays it on a TV show that you realize, hey, yeah, I do that same thing. Just like the way she kind of like hesitates to come back in, where she's weary of running into the door. I've done that. That is so funny. Although, when she goes on to confront Nancy about producing more cream pies than an obsessive-compulsive pastry chef, it's clear that little things aren't the subject of conversation.
I have my reasons.
Yes, and I've seen those reasons packed into his Sergio Valente jeans.
What a vivid use of the adjective packed. Oh, good one, Peggy. No wonder you got that musing job. You truly are a writer. But she can't hear my praise, not where she is emotionally right now. She's swinging for everybody, going hard after shameless Nancy and even gentle, well-meaning Hank himself.
How could you be a look the other wayer?
Now, Peggy, you're sort of freaked out because it's still fresh for you.
Say what you will about Peggy, voice your disdain and hatred of her, as is your right as a presumably American citizen, but this is perhaps her most human and compassionate moment. She is the cleansing fire, the righteous fury, the scourge needed to burn away the filth that everybody else has just accepted as part of their daily lives, just as we do with the squid.
Ginkgo biloba.
Boggle.
Her callouts for all the wrongdoings is certainly on point, and her sympathy for poor Dale is, very importantly, quite empathetic. When the next day dawns, everything plays out exactly as it did in the beginning, but it is now painfully obvious to Peggy how shameless and lurid this infidelity is. We have officially stepped through the looking glass and come out on the other side to meet a disturbing parallel of what once was, leading to this simply exquisite exchange. It's so good, I love it.
Well, well, well.
Well,
Jahan Redcorn.
Peggy Hill.
Well, well, well.
Oh my gosh, it's so great how he completely misses her anger. Like, okay, can I confess something that's kind of bad? Something that you guys might hate me for? Like, okay, here we go, I don't care. I freaking love John freaking Redcorn. It is a miracle that his actions can be so reprehensible and aggravating, but the man himself maintains a degree of likability, and dare I even say nobility. It's really weird, I don't even understand it. I'm probably a bad person for liking him, because he's both pathetic and cocky and entitled. He's like easily distracted when he's no longer needed. He's like very easily sort of like there but not there, and that's just, it's so interesting. I love him as a problem, you know what I mean? And that's a lot more than I can say for Nancy, who barely exists outside of just the affair joke, you know, being little more than just Peggy's neighbor who isn't named the goddess Min. But like John Redcorn just has so much going on, and I'm so fascinated by his psychology. It's just so, ooh, I love him as just like this issue that we all have to deal with. He's amazing. Of course, even the most praiseworthy of tapeworms is still just a tapeworm, so let's keep that in mind for any compliments that I give John. He is still just as bad as Nancy, if not a little bit worse, and any like praise I have of him or anything that I like about him does come with a massive asterisk tattooed right across its face. Any hoozle, what's truly awful for poor Peg is that she has undergone this huge shift in her understanding of the neighborhood and has no meaningful way of venting her disgust. No one to talk about this with, and not only just that, but Hank even goes so far as to tell her that she'll just get used to it.
Live with it a while. You'll see, you'll get used to it.
The only thing I ever want to get used to is a cold glass of lemonade. I am still a journalist, darn it.
Oh lord, I really connect with her eternally on the grind mindset. Whenever I watch a show or movie these days, I always have that little thought in the back of my head of like, oh, how could I review this for YouTube? How many views would it get? Would people like this? Would they not like it? How would I review it? How would I talk about it? Would it get past copyright? All that stuff. So yeah, I definitely connect with that sort of mindset. Wait a second, she'll get used to it. What did you just say, Hank? Oh my goodness, she'll get used to it. She'll just accept it as just a normal thing. What the fuck? Like, oh my god, this situation is so much worse than I thought. Woohoo! Because now this isn't just something that people are afraid to talk about, it has evolved into something that people are actively protecting and stamping down anybody who's brave enough to do that critical act of courage of calling it out for what it is. People are saying not only that I'm not going to talk about it, but you shouldn't either. In fact, the affair has become so normalized in the neighborhood that they have even lost the ability to think of it as an affair at all.
It's about Nancy. She's having an affair.
Oh my God! She's cheating on John Redcorn?
And now finally, blessedly, it is time for us to answer the title of this video. Should Peggy reveal Nancy's lie? Because that really is the only option left to her. She can no longer stand hearing Dale unknowingly praise John Redcorn's fucking ability via baseball analogies, i.e. he never strikes out, he's gonna go all the way, he's got the pitcher pegged, he looks like he wants to charge the box, he's the Bush League champ, his penis is on patrol, and so on. The secret has begun to putrefy in Peggy's heart, and as she puts it,
I'm done, Hank. My rose-colored glasses are off and the world looks flesh-colored and unappealing.
So should Dale be told, yes or no? Well, I spent, no joke, at least 4 days mulling this over, considering things like moral absolutism, the sacrifice of smaller evils to prevent a larger one, and of course how this may affect Dale's relationship with Joseph. That last factor is what ultimately convinces Peggy not to tell him, as Dale so obviously loves his son dearly, and the blowback of telling Dale would mean that their father-son dynamic would be affected to an unquantifiable degree, so in this case Peggy does decide to let that sleeping dog continue to lie.
Yeah, can't watch Encino Man without milk balls, huh?
Thanks, Dad!
Pauly Shore 1992 classic.
It wasn't until my recent rewatch for this review that I realized that Nancy probably sent Joseph into the backyard to intervene Peggy, putting forward her final trump card, the heartstring stinger that makes it impossible for her to harm this little family. In trying to come up with my answer, I also wanted to consider what Dale would want, and thankfully the episode itself even poses the question point blank to him, with Hank asking,
Dale, if the shoe were on the other foot, would you want to know?
and isn't it so, maddeningly brilliant that, instead of letting us off the hook with a definitive yes or no of whether he would want to know, Dale instead dismisses such a possibility entirely, laughing off the question as simply unthinkable.
Don't flatter yourself, Hank. Nancy likes her men thin and pale of face.
And after an intense bit of soul-searching, of dismissing my inherent instinct to be a contrarian and just say, oh yeah, Peggy still should have told him, of wrestling with my own biases and biting my nails when thinking about how Dale would react potentially violently, I have come to a definitive answer to this video's question, in my opinion. Should Peggy have revealed the truth? Yes, and you know why? Because of two mind-boiling points, ones which burn away any alternative answers. Number one, this was not a singular mistake that Nancy made, a brief bit of ankle aerobatics more than a decade ago, one which had the unfortunate effect of leading to innocent young Joseph existing. The thing is, the sex is still happening to this day. If there were some degree of personal atonement on her end, anything, or even a semblance of regret for betraying Dale's unfailing trust, then I could understand not wanting to destroy a family that was built off the back of a moment of weakness. That would be enough for me to say, okay, for Joseph's sake and Joseph's sake alone, let's keep things quiet. I don't like doing it, but whatever. But Nancy has never stopped doing it. That's what tips the scales for me. That's what just drives me insane. She shows no signs of giving it up. Even after this huge scare with Peggy happens, the oil rig named John Redcorn just keeps on pumping on infinitum. And that would be enough. That would be enough for my oh so spiteful heart to say, tear this beach blonde, bad built butch body snatcher down. But oh, then comes the second scorching cardinal sin, the thing that reveals how utterly soulless this mean woman is. When Peggy is on her way to tell Dale the truth, Nancy confronts her and... what does she say? What exactly is her plea for Peggy's silence?
Suge, listen, I love Dale, but in a lights-on sort of way.
She can't keep getting away with it.
I'm gonna take a shower.
I'll join you.
Oh, my friends, did I ever tell you that I'm a bit of a masochist? Because the thought of somebody ever saying that to me, or somebody that I care about, is such a sublimely awful thought that it excites a giddy feeling of self-immolation, a tidal wave of unspeakable horror that overwhelms the senses and puts you into a state of total disarray, one so awful that it would be within arm's reach of your memory for the rest of your life. Because what do you mean in a lights-on kind of way? You can't just hit the man with the classic, the truth is your nuts never mattered all that much to me, and go back to hitting the backbreaker gritty with big mountain fucks cakes. What are you talking about? Yes, my friends, it is for those two reasons, the goddamn never-ending story of screwing and the fact that she thinks that voicing her disgust for her husband's body is the way to excuse her choices. Oh, she needs to be taken down, and I need to behold her fall from the heavens like lightning! But that doesn't happen. No, the Diamond Dogs continue their slumber. Even though they are wrecked up and paralyzed, they are still civilized. Peggy simply can't find the malice in her heart to destroy Dale's entire world, meaning that she is, in fact, a better person than I.
Would you like to come in for some pie?
I should go.
But now, just like everybody else, she has become a part of the big lie. And she'll have to live with that. But you know, I think she can do it. I think she can live with it. She can live with it. YouTube, delete this entire review. You can't. Well, could you at least give me one little chuckle to smooth my troubled brow?
You know, Hank, I
know, and Peggy?
I got you.
All right, then.
Great.
Boggle.
It is.
Ah, sweet, cooling ludicrousness. Oh, thank you so much. So yes, this was more than just another episode of King of the Hill. This was one of those magical experiences, a swirling node of scandal, silliness, and accepted sorrow. It was almost too big for me to handle, which is what she said. All while Dale thinks that the girl who said it still loves him.
I thank God every day for sending me an angel with the hots for my track team physique.
So there we go, that was Peggy's Headache. This was King of the Hill at its most effortlessly engaging, a true deep kiss from the muse of storytelling herself, the kind of toe-curling smooch that reaches all the way to the back of your neck.
Don't worry, old John R. will fix her up just like he does for Nancy 3 times a week.
Gosh, what a masterpiece. No notes for improvement from me. This was fudging flawless. Better yet, this subject of baby making will be continued in the next episode, where a very special lady will also be going at it doggy style.
I knew that stud was no good. He wouldn't even look her in the eye.
But that's for next time, and hey, besides, I promised you folks some musings. So let's wrap all this up and get to those silly bits that are stuffed down some Sergio Valente jeans, shall we? We can now say that this episode, to the best of my ability, has indeed been reviewed to death. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next review. Here we go. Trailblazers are often fired. Shakespeare really shook things up. Nothing good ever came from a chipped tooth. Gender roles engender roles. Buses are the best source of new friends. Meal prep gets you more than you can chew. If the mission is impossible, then missing it is mandatory. Let the chips fall where they may is just an excuse for dropping your chips. A big mouth leads to a fat head, wouldn't I know. Going to the doctor may be a rash decision. And finally, my crowning achievement, tough cookies always have a chip on their shoulder.
Did anyone else sniff today's garbage? And I thought yesterday's garbage smelled good.